each other and we actually get government contracting accomplished. I've written 15 books on federal contracting, this 500 pages apiece. These are, like I said, there's going to be a lot of nuance that we're going to talk about. What I'm trying to do over these next couple days here is just to give you an overview of what the process is, and as I said, we'll get into details later. I'm going to provide you the knowledge, the tools, and support. So as we go through this, I'll be teaching you things. I'll be suggesting resources that are available online to you so that you can go off and find things yourself. It's really important that you stay abreast of where to get information. There's just a couple standard places, but if you become intimately familiar with those, that's going to be what gives you your competitive advantage, because you'll be able to use those tools that your competitors aren't aware of. There's numerous paths to success. You know, we all think about federal government contracting as I'm a company, I'm a prime contractor, and I'm going to get a contract with the federal government. But there's also ways that you can get government business by being a subcontractor to another prime contractor, to be a teaming partner with somebody, to get a GSA schedule. So these are all different ways, and we're going to talk about each of them. So don't think that there's just one way to accomplish this task. There's different ways, and we'll talk through some of those. Some techniques that we're going to talk about in class are going to work within your industry, some won't. And we'll talk about why it may not work in your particular industry, so that you don't waste your time going down dead ends. You know, the idea here is to make this a very efficient process for you so that you can use the minimal amount of resources to win these federal contracts. How many companies in here have been in business for over 2 years? Okay. One of the avenues that is available to you, notice only 2 of you out of this group of 4 I feel like you've been in business for more than 2 years. The reason why I asked is because there's a program called the GSA Schedule, which is unlike a normal RFP. A normal RFP says, I'm releasing it today, and it's due in 30 days, and if you don't get it in 30 days, you're out of luck, right? Even if you're 2 minutes late, you're out of luck. I remember one time I went to deliver a proposal. It was worth several hundred millions of dollars, and I got to the contracting office, and I was there an hour early, and I went to turn over the proposal to the contracting officer, and the contracting officer said, "Oh, great, you're an hour early, but it was due yesterday." Oh my God, like, my heart stopped. You know, it literally stopped because we had put so much effort into it. And guess what? He was making a joke. It was not a funny joke. So my point. So my point is that when you have an RFP, it's due at that moment. You can't blame the U.S. Postal Service. You can't say, well, it arrived on base. None of that works. It has to be in the contracting officer's hands by that time. Otherwise, you're just not even considered. But a GSA schedule is a different kind of animal. A GSA schedule is where whenever you want, you can decide to get on a GSA schedule, and you can put together all the documents that you need to do that. The government takes your information, reviews it, and then once they award you the contract, you don't get any dollars when they award you a contract, but what you now have is an avenue to sell your goods and services to the government. So when any other agency needs something, they already have a contract vehicle in place. The government needs 3 things in order to buy from you. They have to have a bona fide need, so they actually have to need your product or service. They have to have a way to get to you, which means they have to have a contract vehicle in place, some form of contract with you. So that's either you won a request for proposal and you've won a contract, or you have a GSA schedule, or you take credit card purchases and they buy it through a credit card purchase. But they have to have a way to get to you, and they have to have the funds available, which means that that particular need has gone through the appropriation cycle and it's actually been funded. We're going to talk about all this, but those are the 3 things the government needs. So you might have a great product, but if they don't need it, then you're not going to be able to sell it. You might have a great product and they don't have a way to get it from you, then they can't buy it from you. So that's why you have to have these contract vehicles in place. And finally, as we just learned from experience, particularly the 800,000 people who are unemployed for 31 days, If the government doesn't have the authority to spend, which is what happens during a government shutdown, the money is put on hold and no money can be spent, then they can't buy from movie theaters. So those are the three sort of challenges. Learn from each other's creative ideas. You may say something that sparks a discussion in this class. Jot those things down, because those could be keys to your success when you actually are going after contracts yourself. And we're creating a safe space here, so no question is too stupid to ask. We're all trying to learn, and we want to make sure that you leave here with the skill set that you need. So if something's just not sitting right with you, or it just doesn't seem to make sense, just ask me and we'll clarify it. And please participate fully, because everything you're doing here is a step towards you getting a government contract. And so as we do the individual exercises, I'm going to ask you to keep track of things, start a file. In fact, I talk about this next. I recommend some sort of filing system. Do this electronically. If you're a paper-based person, do a paper-based. But basically, throughout this course, we're going to be creating a whole lot of documents. And as you are creating these documents, you're going to need them for future things that you're doing in the federal government. So just put them off in a file someplace, and that way it'll save you time later on. You're going to be looking up information that's specific to your industry, to your company, to the products and services you sell. When you look up that information, start with an Excel spreadsheet, just keep track of that, because that again is going to help you as you go through this stuff. All the courses that I mentioned, materials are all going to be in Edgit. You'll have access to that. Make sure you keep track of things that you can help others with, or things that people can help you with in federal contracting. So as you make these little commitments to each other about, hey, I have a conference room that if you ever have a meeting, you can use it, or things like that, just keep track of that, because that's going to be helpful to you as you go through it. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. So now, let's go over here to...
While she's doing that, I'm going to pass this sign-in sheet around. We want to feed you all well. We just need proof that a body was here. So if you'll just sign your name, just sign beside your name, I appreciate it. So they won't think Sam and I just had a big party or something. Yeah.
Should I go to your OneDrive? Where are the rest of the files?
They're on the desktop.
On the desktop.
There's a folder on the desktop.
Did you put day 2 up as well?
You had week
Did.
1. I just moved it all over there.
Yeah, I need to get the day 2 files.
Go back to the week 1 file up at the top.
Uh-huh.
Select week 1.
Yeah, click on the
Your yes. It's Stephanie will want that. I'll put mine on there at the end. But if you could pass it on around.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, we won't get that, okay.
Hey, she's got computer skills. She's used to a Mac. Sign-in sheet. Yeah, sure.
It's
Yeah, just pass it
going around.
around.
Yeah. He's got heard back from John. He said everything was good.
All right, so the first thing I wanted to do is just sort of talk a little bit about the federal government process. When we talk about the government marketplace, we're talking about sellers, and sellers are people like prime contractors, subcontractors, federally funded research and development centers, schools, universities go after. Individuals can be government contractors. So those are all the people that consist of the selling group. The buyers are any of the civilian agencies, NIH, CDC, Social Security Administration. Those are all the civilian agencies. DOD is Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. Sometimes international organizations can buy off federal contracts, things like the World Health Organization, the World Bank, and then sometimes state agencies can buy off of federal contracts, particularly the GSA schedules. So that if your state needs certain products or services, they can also use federal contracts. What does the government buy? They buy consumer goods. Things that you would buy in your house, they buy. So any type of cleaning supplies, socks, they buy services, so any kind of consulting or data analysis or any kind of services associated with the products and services you sell. They buy government unique items like F-22s, bombers, etc., that are very specific where they're a monopsony. They're one buyer with a few sellers because not many people need their own personal F-22. And then they also do research and development. So things that you're doing that are innovative and creative, they're looking to buy those types of things too. In fact, there's a big outreach right now to Silicon Valley because a lot of people in Silicon Valley didn't want to play in federal government for the same reason you mentioned, too much paperwork. So the government has really tried to streamline a lot of their processes so that more companies will play because they can really benefit from the fact of having more companies involved with research and development. Basically, depending on who's putting the numbers together in terms of how it's being counted, we have lots of people that it's over $500 billion in contracting opportunities annually. So there's enough room in this marketplace for everybody to play. You just have to be smart about it. So let's just talk a little bit about what do you see some of the differences in doing business with the government versus doing business with a commercial company. So all of you today, I'm assuming, have commercial contracts where you're a commercial entity and you're contracting with other commercial entities, right? You buy from this company. So that's an example of a commercial-to-commercial relationship. What would you think would be some of the differences between that type of relationship over here versus doing business with the federal government?
Less paperwork to start with.
Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, the government, has been very, very regulation intensive and paperwork oriented. They are trying to minimize that because they realize that it's a turnoff to most people trying to get into federal market. Good. What else?
Just speed, which business works.
Yeah. You could go out after work. My friend back here who likes to drink beer could find somebody in the class who also likes to drink beer. I'm sure you wouldn't have that hard of a time to do that. But you could sit at a bar and write something on the back of a napkin, right? And the two of you would have a business deal, right? In the federal government, things are much more structured, much more, the government has a very formalized approach to contracting. Why do you think they would have such a formalized approach to contracting?
To spending the people's money.
Yeah.
Right. Us as taxpayers, we want to know they're not just spending frivolously, right? So,
Don could help himself on that.
Sorry, that just called me funny.
I know. I'm in Northern Virginia, You just kind of grow accustomed to this. Anyway, but there's a lot of oversight, right? Because the government is spending our money. So things like, if I want to buy a pen on behalf of the government, I have to have approval to be able to do that. I can't just go off and buy it. I have to show that I need that to support a government contract. It is kind of funny because for the rank and file in the federal government, I'm in government agencies every week teaching. And for the people in the rank and file, they know what all these rules and regulations are. And a lot of times, like some of the things that you're hearing about in the news that, $15,000 tables and things like that, like the rank and file know that that's not the way that things get done. So it's a challenging time right now. My point is that the government has a lot of checks and balances to verify that those kind of things don't happen or, don't happen with the frequency, which is why you typically hear about it. Anybody remember the GSA debacle out in Las Vegas? Anybody remember what happened? there was some impropriety going on. The Washington Post got wind of it. There was pictures on the front page of government executives and contractors in bathtubs with champagne and bubbly and the whole 9 yards. And because of that one instance, every government agency for about a year, and it's still going on, has had a very hard time justifying being able to go anywhere. So travel was strictly curtailed, conferences were strictly curtailed. It really, that one event had this triggering event for the future to stop things like that. So there is this sort of checks and balances when it comes to things like that. What's another difference between doing business with federal and commercial? How many companies are small businesses? Does the government care about you? Why do you say no?
We sometimes are just a speck of dust in their eyes.
Anybody have a different opinion? Well, if I'm a commercial company, I don't have to do business with small businesses. I can flat out not do business with small business. I can say, I have a tried and true company that I work with time and time out, and I like them, and we get along well, and we play golf together, and I'm just going to give all my business to them. The government doesn't operate like that. The government is very focused on socioeconomic concerns, which means where there are areas where there's too much labor and not enough work, the government identifies that as a labor surplus area, and they give you extra evaluation points if you happen to be located in a labor surplus area. A historically underutilized business zone, hub zone, they give you extra points for that. They have contracts that are set aside for just those types of entities. If you're a women-owned business, if you fall under certain thresholds as being a small business, the government has goals that the Small Business Administration sets for all federal agencies. And they say, you have to meet these small business goals. And the government has programs that they put in place to ensure that they're meeting those small business goals, whereas a commercial company doesn't have to do that. We're going to talk more about that later soon, but while it may seem that you're a speck of dust in their eye, in reality they have a lot of outreach programs. And quite honestly, the small business lobbying efforts in DC, anytime the government tries to make any change in what they're doing, the small business advocates are all over it. In fact, if the government has a need and they identify at least 3 small businesses that can do that need, they have to make it a small business set-aside. What does that mean? It means that the requirement can only be fulfilled by a small business. So if there's a particular piece of business that you want, and you know of at least 2 other competitors that are small businesses, you can contact the agency and say, I'd like this to be made a small business set-aside program. And and here are 3 companies that can do this work. And the government has to make it a small business set-aside. And once it becomes a small business set-aside, it takes an act of Congress to get it not to be a small business set-aside. So, the government really does care about things like that. So we talked about the regulations that are different. There are certain things that you can do in the commercial space that you can't do in the government space. So how many people have been, where are my golfers? Have you been to golf tournaments? Did you get anything at the golf tournament? Like what did they give you?
Towel or ball
Umbrella.
Yeah.
Couple
I went to Dominion Electric's golf tournament a couple years. They gave us tool bags and they gave us jackets and all kinds of crazy things. Have you ever heard of any federal agency having a golf tournament? No. Have you invited, if you were to try to invite, how many companies have golf outings? Golf tournaments. Do you ever invite government people to them? No. The reason why you can't invite them to it is because the government wants to make sure that there's no impropriety. In other words, if I came to your golf tournament, you might think, oh, I'm going to definitely give a business to him because they treated me really well at this golf tournament. And the government doesn't want that to occur, nor does there even the perception of that to occur. So when they came to one of our facilities for a live test demonstration, where we actually demonstrated